You find yourself walking down a quiet, narrow street. It's late. Later than you meant to stay out. The kind of late where the city has already exhaled its last breath of the day, and now it's just you, the pavement, and the occasional flicker of a streetlight that's seen better decades. The alleyways here are old, not the charming kind of old, just old. The kind where the walls lean in slightly, as if they're tired of holding themselves up. The kind where you can smell the faint trace of rain that fell hours ago, or maybe yesterday, or maybe it's been raining here forever in some quiet, patient way. You're not lost, not exactly. You know where you're going, or at least you thought you did. But something about this street feels different tonight. There's a story they tell in Japan, a story that's been told for hundreds of years, passed down through generations like a secret that nobody really wants to keep, but nobody can quite let go of either. It's about the faceless ones, the Nopperabo. You might have heard of them before, maybe in a book, or a late-night documentary, or one of those internet rabbit holes you fall into when you can't sleep. The faceless ghosts, the ones who look like ordinary people until they turn around, and then you see it. Or rather, you don't see it. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just smooth, blank, like someone took an eraser to their face and forgot to draw it back in. But here's the thing about the Nopperabo. They're not trying to scare you, at least not in the way you'd expect. They don't chase you through the streets. They don't scream or moan or rattle chains. They don't even really do anything when you think about it. They just exist. They appear. They turn around. And then you see, or don't see, and that's it. The horror, if you can even call it that, is in the absence, the empty space where something should be. You keep walking. The street curves gently to the left, following the contour of some long-forgotten city plan. The buildings here are a mix of old wooden structures and newer concrete boxes, pressed together like mismatched teeth. Laundry hangs from a few balconies, still and lifeless in the windless night. You pass a vending machine. Its lights are the brightest thing for blocks, a little glowing shrine to convenience in the darkness. You think about stopping, getting a drink, something cold, something to ground you back in the ordinary world of transactions and carbonation, but you don't stop. You keep walking. The first recorded stories of the Nopperabo come from the Edo period. That's the 1600s, if you're keeping track. Japan was closed off from the rest of the world then, turned inward, developing its own unique ecosystem of ghosts and monsters and things that go bump in the night. And there were a lot of things that went bump. Yurei, yokai, spirits, and demons and creatures that existed in that fuzzy space between the natural and supernatural. The Nopperabo were just one entry in a very long catalogue of the uncanny, but they stood out. Because while other ghosts had motivations, revenge, unfinished business, a really strong attachment to a particular bridge, the Nopperabo didn't seem to want anything. They just appeared, they showed their non-face, and then, usually, they disappeared. You turn down another street, narrower this time. The kind of alley that feels like it wasn't designed for walking so much as for existing. A space between spaces. The silence here is thicker. You can hear your own footsteps now, soft and rhythmic against the pavement. You can hear your own breathing, and then you hear something else. Footsteps, not yours. They're coming from ahead of you, soft, steady. The measured pace of someone who's not in a hurry. Someone who's just walking home maybe, or walking nowhere in particular. Just walking because that's what you do at night when you can't sleep, and the walls of your apartment feel too close. You see a figure ahead, just a silhouette at first, backlit by a distant streetlight. Average height, average build, wearing what looks like a jacket or a coat. Nothing remarkable, nothing strange. Just a person, walking toward you. In the old stories, the Nopperabo would often appear to travellers, late at night, on lonely roads. They'd look like normal people from a distance, a fellow traveller maybe, or a local villager, and then you'd get closer, and they'd turn around, and you'd see. What would you do if you saw someone with no face? Would you run? Would you scream? Would you stand there frozen trying to make sense of what your eyes are telling you, even though your brain is insisting it's impossible? Or would you just keep walking? Because maybe, in that moment, the most terrifying thing wouldn't be the facelessness itself. It would be the question it raises. What else have I been walking past without noticing? The figure gets closer. You can see more details now. A dark jacket, jeans maybe, hands in pockets, head slightly down. The way people walk when they're tired or thinking about something else. Normal. Completely, entirely normal. You prepare to pass each other. That little dance of urban navigation. A slight shift to the right. A barely perceptible nod if you make eye contact. The universal language of strangers sharing a sidewalk. The figure is almost in front of you now, and then they stop. Just stop, right there in the middle of the alley. And slowly, so slowly they begin to turn around. You feel your heart do something complicated in your chest. Not quite fear, not quite curiosity. Something in between. That primitive part of your brain that's still convinced you're wandering the savannah at night, checking for predators in the tall grass. The figure continues to turn. You can see their profile now. The curve of a cheek, the line of a jaw. Normal features, human features, and then they're facing you fully, and you see their face. It's a normal face. Eyes, nose, mouth, all in the right places. They look tired, maybe a little confused about why you're standing there staring at them like they just materialized out of thin air. Are you okay? They ask. Their voice is concerned, genuine. The voice of someone who's worried they've stumbled onto something they shouldn't have, a moment of private crisis playing out in a public space. You nod. Mumble something about being fine, just tired, just walking home. The usual excuses people make when they're caught being strange in public. The person nods back, gives you one more uncertain look and continues walking past you. You stand there for a moment, breathing, feeling slightly foolish, because of course they had a face. Of course they were just a normal person walking home late at night, just like you. Of course the legend didn't manifest itself right there in front of you, convenient and terrifying and perfectly timed. That's not how legends work. That's not how anything works. You start walking again. The thing about the Noperabo is that they exist in a very specific kind of cultural space. They're not quite demons, not quite spirits, not quite anything really. They're more like glitches, errors in the normal programming of reality. They show up, they disrupt your sense of what's normal and possible, and then they're gone. And you're left wondering if you really saw what you thought you saw, or if maybe, just maybe, your brain was playing tricks on you, filling in gaps, creating patterns where there were none. Doing what brains do when they're tired and overstimulated and walking down dark alleys at hours when reasonable people are asleep. The street opens up ahead of you. Wider now, more lights, a few other people walking, scattered and separate, each in their own bubble of late-night solitude. You feel yourself relax slightly. There's safety in numbers, even if those numbers are all strangers who wouldn't necessarily help you if something went wrong. It's just the perception of safety. The illusion that being around other humans makes you less vulnerable to the things that lurk in the dark. But do things lurk in the dark? Or do we just tell ourselves they do? Because the alternative is somehow worse. The alternative being that the dark is just empty, silent, indifferent. That there's nothing lurking at all, just the slow, patient turning of the earth and the quiet decay of everything built on top of it. Maybe that's the real horror. Not the presence of monsters, but their absence. You pass a convenience store. Its lights are harsh and fluorescent, spilling out onto the sidewalk like a challenge to the night. A few teenagers stand outside, huddled around their phones, their faces lit from below in that eerie modern way that makes everyone look like they're telling ghost stories around a campfire. You wonder if they know about the Noperabo. You wonder if anyone their age knows about the old stories anymore, or if those tales have been replaced by newer fears. Creepypastas, digital hauntings, the horror of being seen or not seen online. Same fear, different medium. The fear of erasure, of blankness, of being reduced to nothing. You keep walking. One of the most famous Noperabo stories comes from Lafcadio Hearn, a Western writer who moved to Japan in the late 1800s and fell in love with its ghost stories. He collected them, translated them, preserved them for a Western audience who found the whole thing delightfully exotic and strange. In his version, a man is walking home late at night when he encounters a woman crying by the side of the road. Being a decent person, he stops to ask if she's okay, if there's anything he can do to help. The woman continues to cry, her face buried in her hands. The man tries again, asks what's wrong, offers assistance. Slowly, the woman lowers her hands, and where her face should be, there's nothing, just smooth skin, blank. The man understandably loses his mind a little bit. He runs, finds a nearby street vendor, tells him what he saw, gasps out the whole impossible story. The vendor listens patiently, nods sympathetically, and then says, "You mean, like this?" and reveals his own blank face. It's a good story, a classic setup and payoff, the double scare. The moment where you think you found safety only to realize the horror followed you. But here's what always struck me about that story. The vendor didn't have to do that. The man was already terrified, already running, already convinced he'd seen something impossible. The vendor could have just comforted him, sent him on his way, let him go home and spend the rest of his life wondering if he'd really seen what he thought he saw. But instead, the vendor confirmed it, made it real, made it worse. Why? What does a faceless ghost gain from revealing itself twice? From confirming the horror instead of letting it remain ambiguous? Maybe that's the point. Maybe the Noprabo aren't trying to scare you. They're trying to make you certain, to remove all doubt, to force you to confront the impossible and accept it as real. Or maybe they're just messing with you. Hard to tell, really, when someone doesn't have a face. Makes reading their intentions tricky. You turn down another street. This one's residential. Small houses pressed close together, their windows dark. The occasional garden, neat and minimal. A bicycle leaned against a wall. The quiet markers of ordinary life, continuing its ordinary patterns even while you walk through it like a ghost yourself. You think about all the people sleeping in these houses, tucked into their beds, dreaming their dreams, completely unaware that you're out here walking past their homes in the middle of the night. What do they dream about, you wonder? Do they dream about faceless ghosts? About walking down dark streets and meeting things that shouldn't exist? Or do they dream about normal things? Work stress, family drama. That embarrassing thing they said 5 years ago that still keeps them up at night occasionally? Probably the latter. Most people don't dream about ghosts. Most people dream about taxes and missed deadlines, and whether they remembered to lock the door. The supernatural is the least of most people's concerns. The street curves again, following the shape of some ancient path that probably existed before any of these houses were built. Before there were streets at all. Just a footpath, worn down by generations of travellers moving between villages, carrying goods or news or stories. Stories like the Noprabo. You wonder how many of those travellers saw something strange on their journeys. How many of them arrived at their destination with wild tales of faceless encounters, only to be met with skepticism or laughter, or knowing nods from people who'd seen the same things but learned not to talk about them. Because that's the thing about the impossible. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. But you also can't really talk about it without sounding unhinged, so you keep it to yourself, carry it quietly, let it exist in that private space between what you know and what you can prove. You pass a shrine, small, barely noticeable, just a few stones stacked carefully, a tiny roof to protect them from rain, and some wilted flowers in a plastic bottle. The kind of shrine that's been there so long nobody remembers who or what it's for anymore. Just that it should be maintained, just that it matters somehow. You pause for a moment. Not because you're particularly religious, not because you think whatever spirit or ancestor this shrine honours is going to leap out and demand your respect. Just because it feels right to pause, to acknowledge, to give a moment of attention to something that's asking for it. The stones are smooth, worn, patient. You move on. The thing about urban legends is that they evolve. They change with the times, adapting to new contexts and technologies and fears. The basic framework stays the same, the scary story told to provoke a reaction, but the details shift to match whatever's currently unsettling to the collective unconscious. The Noprabo, though, they've stayed remarkably consistent. For centuries, the story has been essentially the same. Person encounters another person, that person turns out to have no face, first person freaks out. The setting might change, the specifics might vary, but the core remains. And maybe that's because the fear they represent is timeless. The fear of anonymity, of facelessness in a more metaphorical sense, of being surrounded by people who could be anyone, anything, nothing, of losing the ability to read expressions, to understand intentions, to connect with the humans around you on a basic visual level. In a modern context, that fear feels even more relevant. We're surrounded by avatars and usernames and profile pictures that may or may not represent real people. We interact with strangers online who could be bots or trolls or genuine humans, and it's increasingly hard to tell the difference. We're all a little faceless now in a way, all hiding behind screens and carefully curated personas. The Noperabo just made it literal. You emerge from the residential area onto a larger street. Not quite a main road, but wider. More traffic, even at this hour. Taxis cruise past, their lights glowing hopefully. A few late-night workers trudge toward train stations. The city's nocturnal ecosystem, small but persistent. You feel yourself relaxing further. There's something comforting about seeing other people engaged in normal activities. Work, transit, the boring logistics of existence. It grounds you back in reality, reminds you that the world is mostly mundane and that's okay. That's good even. Most of the time, nothing interesting happens. Most of the time, the person walking toward you in a dark alley is just a person, tired, maybe a little lost, maybe thinking about their own problems, their own late-night wanderings. Most of the time, faces stay where they're supposed to be. You check your phone. The screen is too bright and you squint against it. A few messages from earlier in the day that you haven't responded to. A notification about something you don't care about. The usual digital clutter. You check the time, later than you thought. Or earlier, depending on how you look at it. That weird liminal space between late night and early morning where time stops meaning anything concrete. You should probably head home, get some sleep. Tomorrow or today, depending on your definition, is going to come whether you're ready for it or not, but you keep walking. There's something about walking at night that's addictive. The solitude, the quiet, the way the familiar becomes slightly strange when there's no one else around to confirm that you're seeing it correctly. During the day, the city is full of witnesses, other people seeing the same things you're seeing, creating a consensus reality through their collective observation. A building is a building because everyone agrees it's a building. A street is a street because everyone uses it as a street. But at night, with fewer witnesses, things become more uncertain. That building might be a building, or it might be something else, something you can't quite name. Pretending to be a building for the benefit of anyone who happens to look at it. That's the space where legends live, in the uncertainty, in the gaps between what you know and what you can prove. The Noperabo understand this. They exist in those gaps. They are those gaps in a way, the absence made manifest, the uncertainty given form, or the lack of form technically. You pass a park, dark, empty. The swings hanging still and silent from their chains, a slide gleaming dully in the streetlight. The echo of children's laughter from hours and hours ago, or maybe that's just your imagination filling in the expected sounds of a place designed for joy. During the day, this park would be full of life, kids playing, parents watching, dogs being walked, the normal ecosystem of urban recreation space, but now it's just empty equipment. Objects waiting to be used, potential energy stored up and sitting quietly in the dark. You wonder if the Noperabo ever appear in parks, if they sit on swings or stand at the top of slides, faceless sentinels watching over empty playgrounds. Probably not. They seem to prefer alleys, streets, places where you'd expect to encounter other people but maybe hoped you wouldn't. Places where a face, or the lack of one, matters. A playground without children is just sad. It doesn't need ghosts to make it eerie. It's already eerie. Already unsettling in that particular way that empty spaces designed for happiness always are. You keep moving. 1 block, 2 blocks, 3. The streets blur together. Left turn, right turn, straight ahead. The city is a maze, but a navigable one. You could find your way home with your eyes closed, probably. Your feet know the route. Your body has walked it enough times that it's become automatic. But tonight you're not trying to get home. Not really. You're just walking, existing in motion, letting the night unfold around you without trying to control or direct it. It's peaceful in a way, meditative, the rhythm of footsteps, the gentle hum of distant traffic, the occasional bark of a dog somewhere in the darkness, alerting its owners to some perceived threat that probably isn't threatening at all. Just you, just walking. In Japan there's a concept called mae. It's hard to translate directly, but it refers to negative space, the gaps between things, the pause in a conversation, the silence between notes, the empty space that gives meaning to the filled space around it. The Noperabo are a mae given form, or given non-form really. They're the absence that makes you aware of presence, the lack that makes you appreciate having. They're the space where a face should be, and isn't. And maybe that's why they've persisted for so long in Japanese folklore, because they represent something fundamental about how we perceive the world. Not just what's there, but what's not there. Not just the notes, but the silence between them. You turn down a familiar street. You've been here before. Earlier tonight, maybe, or on some other night. They all start to blend together after a while, these nocturnal wanderings. The same vending machines glowing in the dark, the same crooked telephone pole with its tangle of wires, the same crack in the pavement that you've learned to step over automatically. Familiar, safe, known, and yet. And yet there's always that small voice in the back of your mind wondering if tonight will be the night something changes, if the familiar will suddenly become unfamiliar, if the person you pass on this street will turn around and have no face. It probably won't happen, almost certainly won't happen. But the probably and the almost certainly leave room for doubt, and doubt is where legends live, in the tiny gap between what's likely and what's possible. You pass another person. They're walking quickly, head down, earbuds in, completely absorbed in whatever they're listening to. They don't even glance at you as you pass. You don't see their face, not because they don't have one, but because they didn't turn toward you, because there was no reason for them to acknowledge your existence. Two strangers passing in the night, each in their own private bubble, and you realize that most of the people you pass most of the time you don't see their faces. Not really. You see bodies, shapes, movement. But faces require attention, eye contact, a moment of mutual recognition. Most of the time we're all a little faceless to each other. The Nopperabo just make it obvious. You continue walking. The streets are getting quieter now. Fewer people, fewer lights. The city is settling into its deepest sleep, that stretch of hours between the last person going home and the first person waking up for work. This is the true night, the real darkness, when even the nocturnal ecosystem pauses to rest. You could be alone in the world right now. For all you can see, for all you can hear, you might be the last person awake, the last person moving through these empty streets. It's not a scary thought, just a lonely one. You think about all those travellers from centuries ago, walking these same paths, or paths like them, when the world was darker and quieter, and more full of unknown things, before electricity turned night into a softer version of day, before GPS made being lost nearly impossible. They must have been so much more vulnerable to the unknown, so much more open to seeing things that didn't quite fit into their understanding of how the world worked, and yet in a way maybe they were less vulnerable, because they expected the world to be strange. They built strangeness into their understanding of reality. Ghosts and spirits and yokai weren't aberrations, they were just part of the landscape, things you had to navigate around like mountains or rivers. Now we expect the world to make sense. We expect rational explanations, we expect faces to stay where they belong, and when they don't, when something impossible intrudes into our carefully ordered reality, we don't have the framework to handle it. We don't have the cultural stories that say, yes, this happens sometimes, here's how you deal with it. We just have confusion, and fear, and the desperate hope that what we saw wasn't real. The street narrows again. You're back in the small alleys, the tight spaces between buildings, back in the kind of environment where legends feel more possible. You're not scared, not exactly. You're just aware, paying attention in a way you don't usually pay attention, noticing details you'd normally walk past, the way shadows pool in corners, the sound of water dripping somewhere, the faint smell of cooking oil and garbage and rain-soaked concrete, the texture of the world, rich and specific and real. If a Nopperabo appeared now, you think you'd notice. You'd see them clearly, see the absence of their face in perfect detail. But nothing appears, just the ordinary night, continuing its ordinary existence. You think about Lafcadio Hearn again, that Western writer who collected Japanese ghost stories. There's something both admirable and slightly sad about his project. Admirable because he preserved stories that might have been lost. Sad because in translating them for a Western audience, he inevitably changed them, made them exotic, turned them into entertainment rather than genuine folklore. The Nopperabo in his stories are scary, shocking, meant to provoke a thrill in comfortable readers sitting in comfortable chairs in comfortable homes. But in their original context, maybe they weren't just about fear, maybe they were about something more complex, about the nature of identity, about the masks we wear, about what remains when you strip away the surface, Or maybe they were just about fear. Simple, primal, human fear of the unknown and the impossible. Hard to say. The original storytellers aren't around to ask. You emerge onto a slightly larger street. A few businesses here, their signs dark, their shutters closed, a ramen shop, a convenience store, a place that sells keys, the random assortment of urban commerce waiting patiently for morning. You check your phone again. Still later. Still that weird between time where clocks feel like abstract suggestions rather than concrete measurements. You should really head home now. Really. For real this time. But there's one more street you want to walk down, one more alley to explore, one more chance to see something impossible in the darkness, or not see it. Either way, you turn left. This alley is narrower than most. The buildings on either side seem to lean toward each other, creating a tunnel effect. The streetlights here are older, dimmer. They buzz softly, a constant electrical hum that you feel more than hear. Your footsteps echo slightly, the sound bouncing off walls, coming back to you delayed by milliseconds. A conversation with yourself, mediated by architecture. There's graffiti on one wall, not the artistic kind, just tags. Names or symbols that mean something to someone but nothing to you, claims of territory, statements of existence. I was here, I marked this space, I mattered, at least enough to leave evidence. The Noperabo don't leave evidence. They appear and disappear without trace. No footprints, no fingerprints, no DNA to analyze. Just the memory of the person who saw them, just the story they tell afterward. If they tell it at all. Because who do you tell? Who believes you when you say you saw someone with no face? What's the appropriate social protocol for that conversation? Hey, weird thing happened last night. Oh yeah? Yeah, I met a faceless ghost. Okay. Just thought you should know. Thanks. It's not a conversation that ends well, probably. So maybe most people who see the Noperabo just keep it to themselves. File it away under weird experiences I can't explain. Let it sit there quietly, not quite forgotten, but not actively remembered either. Just another strange moment in a life full of strange moments. You reach the end of the alley, it opens onto a small square. Not really a square, more like a widening where several streets converge. There's a bench here, a few potted plants, a token effort at public space in a city where space is precious. You sit down on the bench, your feet are tired. You've been walking for longer than you realized. Time has that funny way of compressing and expanding when you're moving through darkness. Minutes feel like hours. Hours feel like minutes. You look up at the sky. There are a few stars visible, which is impressive given the city's light pollution. They flicker distantly, indifferent to your presence. They were there long before you were born. They'll be there long after you're gone. Your existence is barely a blink in their timeline. Comforting, in a way. Humbling. The Noperabo have been around longer than you too. Centuries longer. Generations of people have told stories about them, seen them, feared them, wondered about them, and they'll probably be around long after you're gone. Appearing in dark alleys, turning around, revealing nothing. It's their thing, their purpose. As much purpose as a legend can have. You close your eyes for a moment, just resting, just breathing. The night air is cool against your skin. Not cold, just cool. Pleasant almost. You could fall asleep here probably, on this bench in this small square. People do that sometimes, in cities. Fall asleep in public spaces because they're too tired or too drunk or too disconnected to make it home. You're not going to do that though. You're just resting, just taking a moment. When you open your eyes, there's someone sitting on the other end of the bench. You didn't hear them approach, didn't hear footsteps or breathing or the creak of the bench as they sat down. They're just there, present, existing in the space that was empty a moment ago. Your heart does that complicated thing again. That not quite fear, not quite curiosity thing. The person is sitting quietly, not moving, not looking at you, just sitting, staring straight ahead at nothing in particular. They're wearing a coat. Dark, nondescript. Could be anyone. Could be everyone. You want to look at their face. You want to not look at their face. These two desires war inside you, creating a paralysis of indecision. Nice night, the person says. Their voice is normal, pleasant even. The voice of someone making casual conversation with a stranger on a bench. Yeah, you manage. Your voice sounds weird in your own ears. Too loud, too small, too something. You're out late, they observe. Couldn't sleep, you say. Which is true enough. Whether you couldn't sleep because you chose to stay awake or because sleep was genuinely impossible is a distinction that doesn't really matter. Me neither, they say. You both sit there for a moment. Two insomniacs sharing a bench in the small hours of the morning. A very normal situation. Happens all the time, probably. You still haven't looked at their face, you've looked at their coat, their hands, which are folded in their lap. The angle of their shoulders, but not their face. You're not sure why. Maybe because looking would make it real. Whatever you see, or don't see, becomes undeniable once you look directly. Maybe because not looking lets you stay in that comfortable space of uncertainty, where this person could be anyone, could have any face, could be perfectly normal or could be something else entirely. Schrödinger's face, both there and not there until observed. Do you come here often, they ask? It's such a mundane question, the kind of thing people say when they're trying to make conversation, but don't really have anything interesting to say. A social placeholder, verbal white noise. Sometimes, you say. You? First time, actually, they say. Just wandering. Ended up here. It's a good place to end up, you offer. Yeah, they agree. Silence settles between you. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. Two people existing in the same space without the need to fill every moment with words. You risk a glance in their direction. Just a quick look. Nothing obvious. Just turning your head slightly as if you're looking at something past them. In your peripheral vision, you catch the edge of their profile, the curve of a cheek, the line of a nose, normal, human. There. You feel something unclench in your chest. Relief, maybe, or disappointment. Hard to tell. I should probably head home, the person says, standing up. Work in a few hours. Yeah, you say. Me too. They nod to you, a small acknowledgement. Two strangers ending a brief, meaningless interaction with the appropriate social gesture, and then they walk away, back down one of the converging streets, into the darkness. Their footsteps fading gradually until you can't hear them anymore. You sit there for a while longer, still breathing, still existing, still wondering what you were expecting to see. The sky's getting lighter, not much, just the barest hint of pre-dawn grey creeping into the darkness. The city will wake soon. People will start their days. The nocturnal world will fold back into wherever it goes during daylight hours. You stand up, stretch. Your back cracks satisfyingly. Time to head home, time to stop wandering, time to return to the normal world of alarm clocks and breakfast, and pretending you're a person who has their life together. You choose a street. Any street. They all lead somewhere eventually. That's how streets work. As you walk, you think about the Nopperabo one more time, about their persistence. Their refusal to fade into obsolescence even as the world modernizes and rationalizes and explains away every mystery. Maybe they persist because the fear they represent is too fundamental to disappear. The fear of anonymity, of facelessness, of being or encountering the undefined, the unknown. Or maybe they persist because good stories don't need to make sense, they just need to resonate. To touch something in the human psyche that responds with recognition. Yes, they say. This feels true. Even if it isn't real, it's true. You pass a window, see your reflection briefly. Your face looks back at you, familiar and strange in the pre-dawn light. Tired eyes, messy hair. The face you've been carrying around your whole life, so familiar you barely see it anymore. But it's there. Your face, your identity. Your presence in the world. Not blank, not absent, not erased. You keep walking. The streets are definitely getting lighter now. The darkness losing its grip. Morning approaching with its usual inevitability. You think about going to sleep once you get home. Pulling the curtains closed. Shutting out the approaching day. Letting yourself drift off into unconsciousness for a few hours before you have to face the world again. Sleep. The ultimate escape. The closest most people get to non-existence without actually dying. Your own personal Nopperabo experience. Hours where you have no face because you have no awareness, where identity dissolves into dream space and nothing quite makes sense but everything feels inevitable. You turn onto your street, familiar houses, familiar landmarks. The route you've walked 1,000 times in 1,000 different states of mind, almost home. You pass a mirror mounted on a wall at an intersection, one of those convex safety mirrors meant to help drivers see around blind corners. Your reflection appears in it, distorted by the curve. your face stretched and warped into something not quite human. For a moment, just a moment, you look like something else, something other, a stranger to yourself, and then you step past the mirror and you're normal again. Just you, just human, just tired and walking home after a long night of wandering. You reach your building, climb the stairs, find your keys, the mundane rituals of returning home. Inside, everything's exactly as you left it. No ghosts, no mysteries, just your apartment, patiently waiting for your return. You close the door, lock it. Not because you're afraid of faceless spirits following you inside, just because that's what you do. Lock the door. Maintain the boundary between inside and outside, private and public, safe and unknown. You think about making tea or eating something, but you're too tired. The walking has caught up with you. Your body is demanding rest. You head to your bedroom. Don't bother changing clothes. Just collapse onto the bed, still fully dressed, and close your eyes. Sleep comes quickly, mercifully, pulling you down into darkness. And in that darkness, in that space where faces don't matter because eyes are closed and awareness is suspended, you finally understand something about the Noppera. They're not scary because they have no faces. They're scary because they remind us how close we all are to facelessness. How thin the line is between identity and anonymity, between being seen and being invisible. How easy it would be to simply disappear. But you haven't disappeared. You're still here, still breathing, still existing with your face intact and your identity more or less coherent. Tomorrow you'll wake up, go about your day, probably not think about faceless ghosts at all, and the Noppera will continue doing what they have always done, appearing in dark places, turning around, showing nothing, waiting patiently for the next person who walks alone at night, the next traveller who takes a wrong turn down an alley, the next insomniac who can't help but look when someone turns to face them. It's their job, their purpose, the role they've played for centuries, and somewhere, in some dark alley in some quiet city, it's happening right now. Someone is seeing something they can't explain. Someone is facing the impossible. Someone is carrying home a story they'll probably never tell. The Noppera are patient. They have all the time in the world, all the dark alleys, all the lonely travellers. They'll wait. They're good at waiting. You drift deeper into sleep, the thoughts dissolving into dreams, the dreams dissolving into nothing, and outside the city slowly wakes. The sun rises, light returns, the nocturnal world retreats, but it doesn't disappear. It never disappears. It just waits, just like the Noppera for darkness to return, which it always does, night after night after night. Let's talk about the history of facelessness in folklore, because the Noppera, while distinctly Japanese, aren't unique in representing this particular fear. Cultures around the world have their own versions of the faceless, the undefined, the blank. It's almost as if the concept of losing or lacking a face touches something universal in human psychology. In European folklore, there are tales of faceless monks, spirits of religious men whose faces have been erased as punishment for some sin or another. They wander monastery corridors. Their blank faces are a reminder of divine judgment. In Latin American tradition, there are stories of people who encounter strangers on lonely roads. The strangers seem normal until they turn around, revealing smooth, featureless flesh where their faces should be. The details change, the cultural contexts shift, but the core image remains the same, a human figure with no face. Why? What is it about faces that makes their absence so unsettling? Faces are how we recognize each other, how we communicate emotion, how we establish identity. They're the primary way we distinguish one human from another, apart from voice and body language. Without a face, a person becomes unidentifiable, anonymous, impossible to read or understand. They become, in essence, a blank slate. And blank slates are terrifying because we don't know what to project onto them. When you look at someone's face, even a stranger's face, you're receiving information, emotional cues, intent, trustworthiness, or lack thereof. Your brain is processing dozens of subtle signals, making split-second judgments about whether this person is safe or dangerous, friend or foe. But a blank face gives you nothing. No information, no cues, just absence. Your brain, trained to read faces, suddenly has no data to work with. It's like trying to load a web page and getting only a white screen. Error, cannot process, does not compute. And in that moment of confusion, fear rushes in to fill the gap. The Noprabo understand this, or they would if they had the capacity to understand anything, which maybe they do, maybe they don't. Hard to say given the whole no-face situation, but whether they understand or not, they exploit it. That fundamental human need to see faces, to read expressions, to connect with another human being through the universal language of facial features. They offer connection and then reveal emptiness. It's a cruel trick, really, but effective. In Japanese culture specifically, faces carry particular significance. The concept of kao, face, extends beyond the physical. It's tied to reputation, social standing, honor. To lose face is to lose status. To save face is to preserve dignity. The Noprabo in this context represent the ultimate loss of face. Not metaphorical, but literal. A complete erasure of identity and social existence. You can't maintain honor without a face, can't have reputation, can't participate in society. You're reduced to nothing. A blank. Maybe that's why the Noprabo have remained so potent in Japanese folklore. They touch a cultural anxiety that runs deeper than simple fear. They represent social death, complete anonymity in a culture that values harmony and interconnection. To be faceless is to be nothing. But let's pull back from the heavy cultural analysis. Because here's the thing about legends. They don't need deep meaning to persist. Sometimes they stick around simply because they're good stories. Because they provoke a reaction. Because they're fun to tell around campfires or during sleepovers or late at night when you're trying to scare your friends. The Noprabo are, if nothing else, good story material. Simple setup, person meets person, person turns around, no face, end of story. It's economical, efficient. You don't need elaborate backstory or complicated mythology. You don't need to explain where the Noprabo come from, or what they want, or how to defeat them. They just exist. They appear. They reveal. Done. That simplicity is part of their power. There's no fat to trim, no unnecessary details, just the pure, distilled essence of uncanny horror. Person should have face. Person doesn't have face. Brain error. Fear response triggered is almost elegant in a disturbing sort of way. Modern horror tends to over-explain. We get origin stories for our monsters, detailed rules about how they operate, weaknesses to exploit, mythology to unpack. The Noprabo don't bother with any of that. They're pre-modern horror. Horror from a time when stories didn't need to make sense, they just needed to unsettle. You can't kill a Noprabo, can't trap it, can't negotiate with it, can't understand its motivations. It's just there, and then it's not, and you're left with the memory and the uncertainty. That's refreshing in a weird way. In our over-explained, exhaustively analysed modern world, there's something appealing about a legend that refuses to offer answers. The Noprabo are mysteries that remain mysterious, questions with no solutions, blanks that stay blank. Speaking of blanks, let's think about what happens after you see a Noprabo, assuming you do. Assuming you're one of the unlucky or lucky travellers who encounters one on a dark street somewhere. What then? The old stories don't usually tell you. They end with the revelation, the face reveal or non-reveal, the moment of horror, and then they stop. But life doesn't stop. You still have to go home, still have to wake up the next morning, still have to go to work or school or whatever mundane activities fill your days. How do you process an encounter with the impossible? Do you tell people? Risk being labelled crazy or attention-seeking? Do you keep it secret? Carry it around like a weight, never quite sure if what you saw was real? Do you try to rationalise it? Convince yourself it was a trick of the light, a hallucination, a dream you mistook for waking reality. Different people would handle it differently, probably. Personality dependent. Some would become believers, convinced they'd glimpsed something beyond normal reality. Others would stuff it deep down, seal it away, refuse to examine it too closely. But nobody would forget it completely. An experience like that leaves a mark, changes your relationship with darkness, with empty streets, with strangers approaching in the night. You'd always wonder, walking home late, always feel a little flutter of anxiety when someone walks toward you. Always brace yourself for the moment they might turn around. Most of the time they'd have faces, normal, boring, human faces. But you'd still wonder, still anticipate, still carry that small seed of doubt. Is tonight the night it happens again? Probably not. Almost certainly not. But maybe. That's the real horror of the Noprabo, perhaps. Not the initial encounter, but the aftermath. The way they infect your perception of reality, plant uncertainty in your mind, make the familiar feel slightly off. You can't unsee what you've seen, can't unknow what you've learned about the fragility of normal reality. The Noprabo don't need to appear frequently. Once is enough. Once is plenty. That single encounter reshapes your entire relationship with the dark and the unknown. Mission accomplished, basically. Though again, whether they have missions is debatable. Maybe they're just existing, doing their thing, appearing and disappearing without intention or purpose. Maybe they're as confused by us as we are by them. Why do these humans keep screaming at me? I'm just standing here, minding my own business, lacking a face in peace. It's a funny image, really. The Noprabo is bewildered rather than malevolent, not trying to scare anyone, just existing in their faceless state and accidentally terrifying every human they encounter. I didn't choose this, they might say, if they had mouths. This is just how I am, stop judging me. But they don't have mouths, can't speak, can't explain themselves, so we're left to interpret, to project, to fill their blank faces with whatever meanings and motivations we find most compelling. They're mirrors, in a way, reflecting back our own fears and assumptions, showing us what we bring to the encounter. Some people see malevolence, others see tragedy, others see absurdity. The Noprabo themselves, they don't have opinions, can't have opinions, don't have faces to express opinions with, they're just blank. Let's drift into another story for a moment. Not an old legend, but a hypothetical, a thought experiment. Imagine you're sitting in a coffee shop. Daytime, crowded, completely normal situation. You're reading or scrolling on your phone or staring into space, doing the usual coffee shop things. Someone sits down at the table next to you. You glance up briefly the way you do, just acknowledging their presence, and they have no face, right there, in broad daylight, in a crowded public space, a faceless person calmly sitting down with their coffee. How would you react? The immediate instinct might be panic, to shout or run, or somehow alert the crowd to the impossibility occurring in their midst. But then, would anyone believe you? Would anyone else even see what you're seeing? Maybe the facelessness is just for you. Maybe everyone else sees a normal person with a normal face. Maybe the Noprabo experience is fundamentally solitary, private, customized for each witness. That would be worse, in a way. Worse than a shared hallucination or a publicly visible anomaly. Because then you're truly alone with the impossible. No one to confirm or validate your experience. Just you and the blank face and the terrible certainty that you're seeing something no one else can see. You'd look around, try to catch someone's eye, silently asking, "Do you see this? Is this happening? Am I losing my mind?" But everyone else would just be drinking their coffee, living their normal lives, oblivious to the horror unfolding at the next table over, and the faceless person would just sit there, calm, unhurried, maybe raising their coffee cup to where their mouth should be. The cup disappearing into the blank space and presumably somehow delivering caffeine despite the absence of any visible orifice. Eventually you'd have to make a choice, confront it or ignore it. Most people probably would choose ignore. Safer, less likely to result in public embarrassment or psychiatric evaluation. You'd finish your coffee quickly, leave, step back out into the sunny day and tell yourself you imagined it. Stress, lack of sleep, too much coffee, ironically. But you'd know, deep down, in that part of you that can't be rationalized away, you'd know you saw something impossible, and coffee shops would never feel quite the same again. That's the thing about encountering the impossible. It's sticky, it clings to you, infects ordinary places and moments with a hint of unease. The Noprabo don't even need to be supernatural to achieve this effect. They just need to exist in your memory, in your awareness, as a possibility you can't quite dismiss. Fear is mostly about anticipation anyway. The thing jumping out at you is scary for a moment, but the possibility of something jumping out, that's scary continuously, endlessly, for as long as you're in a situation where jumping could occur. The Noprabo have mastered anticipatory horror. They're the possibility lurking in every dark encounter, every stranger approaching, every face turned away. They probably appear rarely, maybe very rarely, maybe only a handful of times per century, but the idea of them, the story, that appears constantly, Every time someone walks alone at night, every time a figure emerges from shadow, every time someone starts to turn around. Is this it? Is this the moment? No, probably not, almost certainly not. But maybe, and that maybe is enough, let's shift gears again, talk about the practical side of being faceless. Because if Noprobo were real, actually real, existing in the world as physical entities, they'd face some serious logistical challenges. How do they eat? No mouth. How do they breathe? No nose. How do they see where they're going? No eyes. Do they need to eat or breathe or see? Are they corporeal enough to require biological functions? The stories don't say. The stories don't care. The stories are focused on the horror of the moment, not the boring practicalities of faceless existence. But it's fun to think about. Maybe they don't need food. They're sustained by fear, or confusion, or the general psychic energy of humans encountering the inexplicable. Maybe they don't need to breathe. They're beings outside normal biological constraints. They exist in some twilight space between living and dead, physical and metaphysical. Maybe they don't need to see. They sense humans some other way. Echolocation. Or they can feel the presence of potential witnesses, or they just stand in one place and wait for someone to stumble across them. The facelessness might not be a curse or a punishment at all. It might just be how they are, their natural state, perfectly functional for their needs, whatever those needs might be. We assume faces are necessary because we need them. Our entire existence is built around facial communication. Reading expressions, making eye contact, conveying emotion through thousands of tiny muscle movements. But maybe that's just a human thing. Maybe Noprobo communicate differently, feel differently, exist differently. Maybe they pity us, actually. All these complicated faces, so much expression, so much vulnerability written across our features. How exhausting, they might think. How limiting. To have every emotion broadcast, every thought potentially readable in the twitch of an eyebrow or the curl of a lip. We think they're missing something. Maybe they think we have too much. It's all perspective. Of course, this assumes Noprobo have thoughts and perspectives, which is probably giving them too much credit. They're legends, stories, embodiments of a concept. They don't need internal lives or philosophical viewpoints. They just need to be blank. That's their whole job. Everything else is us projecting, trying to make sense of them, trying to give shape to the shapeless, definition to the undefined, which is very human. We can't help it. We're pattern-seeking creatures. We see faces in clouds and burnt toast. We create narratives to explain random events. We need things to make sense. The Noprobo refuse to make sense. They're anti-pattern, anti-narrative, anti-sense. And maybe that's why they're so unsettling. They resist our fundamental need to understand and categorize. They just are. Blank. Inexplicable. Other. No amount of analysis or rationalization changes that. Let's come back to you for a moment. Walking home. After your long night of wandering, you're in bed now, drifting in that space between waking and sleeping. That liminal zone where thoughts become strange and fluid. You're thinking about faces, about all the faces you've seen in your life. Family, friends, strangers on streets. Faces on screens, faces in dreams, thousands of faces, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. Your brain has processed and stored all of them, creating a vast database of human features, and yet, if asked to describe most of them, you couldn't. They're there, filed away, but not consciously accessible. Just a general sense of, yes, I've seen human faces, lots of them. They have eyes and noses and mouths, but specifics? Gone. Unless the face belongs to someone important, someone you see regularly or someone who made a strong impression. Most faces just blur together, become generic, faceless, in their own way. We're surrounded by practical Noprobo, people we pass and immediately forget, people whose faces register as human without any distinguishing detail sticking. The supernatural Noprobo just make it literal. Take the forgetting, the blurring, the anonymity, and make it visible. You're all face-blind to each other, they might be saying. You just don't realize it. Or maybe they're not saying anything. Maybe it's just us, projecting meaning onto blank spaces, trying to turn randomness into message. We need things to mean something, need encounters to have purpose, need the strange to somehow illuminate the normal. But sometimes the strange is just strange. The blank is just blank. No deeper meaning, no hidden message, no revelation waiting to be discovered. Just a person with no face standing in an alley, turning around, existing briefly in your field of vision, and then gone. And you're left with nothing but the memory and the question, did that really happen? You're falling asleep now, really falling, consciousness dimming, thoughts fragmenting. The last thing you think about is faces. How strange they are, really. How we wear them without choosing them. How they define us without our input. You can't see your own face without a mirror or a photo. It exists for everyone else, not for you. You're faceless to yourself. Have been your whole life. Maybe that's what the Noparabo are trying to tell us. Not that they're faceless, but that we're all a little faceless. All a little unknown, even to ourselves. Maybe especially to ourselves. Or maybe they're not trying to tell us anything. Maybe they're just existing. Just being blank. Just doing whatever it is that faceless ghosts do when nobody's watching. Which is probably nothing. Because without faces, how would we know? Sleep takes you fully now, pulls you under, dissolves you into darkness. And somewhere, in a dark alley, in some city you'll never visit, someone else is walking alone. Someone else is seeing something impossible. Someone else is facing the blank. The Noparabo don't sleep, don't need rest. They just continue, night after night, century after century, waiting in the darkness, ready to turn around, ready to show nothing. Morning comes slowly, then all at once. Light filtering through your curtains, birds starting their daily noise, the city waking up with its usual lack of grace. You open your eyes, stare at the ceiling. Your brain is still foggy from sleep, thoughts not quite coherent yet. For a moment, you don't remember last night. The walking, the alleys, the stranger on the bench. Then it comes back, gradually, like a photograph developing in reverse. You walked, you wandered, you thought about faceless ghosts. You didn't see one, or did you? That person on the bench. You never really looked at their face, not directly, not completely. They could have been anyone, could have had any face, could have had no face. You'll never know now. The moment passed, the opportunity closed. Schrodinger's face remains unobserved, existing in superposition between present and absent. You sit up. Your body aches in that pleasant way bodies ache after long walks. Muscles reminding you that you moved, that you existed, that you covered distance, you check your phone, messages, notifications, the usual digital debris that accumulates while you're offline. Nothing important, nothing urgent, just the background hum of modern existence. You should probably shower, eat something, start your day properly, but instead you sit there thinking about legends, about stories. About the things we tell ourselves to make sense of the senseless. The Noparabo exist because we need them to exist, because the world without them is somehow less interesting, less mysterious, less full of possibility. If everything can be explained, if every shadow resolves into something mundane when light hits it, if every stranger has a normal face and a boring backstory, then what's left? Just reality. Plain, understandable, safe, and safe is good, safe is comfortable, but safe is also boring. So we create legends, or legends create themselves maybe, emerging from the collective unconscious, taking shape in stories passed from person to person. We need the Noparabo, need them to lurk in dark alleys, need them to turn around at inconvenient moments, need them to remind us that the world isn't completely mapped and understood. That there are still mysteries, still uncertainties, still blank spaces on the map where ancient cartographers wrote, "Here be monsters," or in this case, "Here be people with no faces." You finally get up, shuffle to the bathroom, look at yourself in the mirror. Your face looks back at you, tired, slightly dishevelled, but there, intact, all features present and accounted for. You touch your cheek, solid, real, warm. You have a face. You've always had a face. You'll presumably continue to have a face for the foreseeable future, unless you encounter a Noparabo. And then who knows? Maybe facelessness is contagious. Maybe it spreads like a curse or a disease. Maybe everyone who sees one eventually becomes one. Probably not, almost certainly not. But maybe. You shower. The water is hot and helps clear the remaining fog from your brain. You think about your day, the things you need to do, the places you need to be, normal things, mundane things. Things that don't involve ghosts or legends or walking alone at night. Though you know you'll do it again, the walking, the wandering, Maybe not tonight, but soon. Because there's something addictive about it. The solitude, the darkness, the possibility, the chance, however slim, of seeing something impossible. Most nights nothing happens. You walk, you think, you go home. Standard operating procedure for urban insomniacs everywhere. But sometimes, very rarely, once in a lifetime maybe, something does happen. Someone turns around, and you see or don't see, and your life splits into before and after. Before you saw the Nopera bow, after you saw the Nopera bow, two different versions of reality. Two different ways of understanding the world. You get dressed, make coffee. The rituals of mourning grounding you back in the practical. Your apartment looks exactly the same as when you left it. Nothing disturbed, nothing out of place, no evidence that you spent hours wandering through darkness, thinking about legends, contemplating impossibility. Just your normal space, your normal life. Which is fine, which is good, which is exactly what you wanted, really, isn't it? You drink your coffee slowly, thinking about faces and the lack thereof, about stories and why they persist, about the difference between knowing something intellectually and understanding it viscerally. You know the Nopera bow are legends, stories, cultural artifacts, not real in any material sense, but you also understand, on some level deeper than knowledge, that they're real in a different way, real as ideas, real as fears, real as possibilities that haunt the edges of darkness, real enough. Which is the only kind of real that matters for legends. They don't need to manifest physically, don't need to interact with the material world, they just need to exist in human consciousness, in stories and fears and late-night thoughts. The Nopera bow have done that for centuries, they'll probably continue doing it for centuries more. Long after you're gone, long after everyone you know is gone, long after the city you walked through last night has crumbled and been rebuilt and crumbled again, the story will remain, the blank face will persist, because it touches something fundamental, something that doesn't change even as everything else does, the fear of anonymity, the dread of erasure, the horror of being reduced to nothing. These aren't modern fears or ancient fears, they're just human fears, timeless, universal. The Nopera bow give them shape, or give them shapelessness, technically. They provide a focal point for anxieties that might otherwise remain diffuse and unnameable. It's easier to fear a faceless ghost than to fear the abstract concept of losing your identity. Easier to imagine avoiding a dark alley than to imagine avoiding existential dread. The Nopera bow make the abstract concrete, the philosophical personal. They're doing us a favour, really, giving us something specific to be afraid of instead of everything all at once. You finish your coffee, wash the cup, put it away. Time to face the day. Time to be a person with a face doing face-having person things. Time to forget about legends and return to reality. But you won't forget. Not completely. The Nopera bow have done their work, planted themselves in your consciousness, claimed a small corner of your awareness. Tonight or tomorrow night or next week, you'll think about them again. You'll wonder. You'll look at strangers differently. You'll carry them with you the way everyone who's ever heard the story carries them. A small weight. A minor adjustment to how you perceive the world. Not enough to change your life, just enough to make it slightly stranger, slightly more interesting, slightly more uncertain, which is what good legends do. They don't transform reality, they just tilt it, shift the angle slightly, make the familiar feel a little off. You grab your bag, your keys, your phone. All the modern totems required for leaving the house. You open the door, step out into the day. The sun is bright. The air is clear, everything is normal and mundane and exactly as expected. No ghosts, no mysteries, no faceless figures lurking in broad daylight, just a regular day in a regular city full of regular people with regular faces. You start walking, different direction than last night, different streets, different destinations, but the same underlying rhythm, footsteps, forward motion, the eternal human activity of moving from one place to another. You pass people, they pass you, a constant flow of human traffic, everyone going somewhere, everyone preoccupied with their own thoughts. You glance at faces as they pass, can't help it. Human nature, most of them blur together, generic features. Forgettable arrangements of eyes and noses and mouths, but they're all there, all intact, all normal, No blanks, no absences, no faces that fail to be faces. Just another day of existing among other existing beings. Nothing special, nothing strange, exactly how it should be, and yet there's a part of you, small but persistent, that's always watching now, always checking, always ready for the moment someone turns around and reveals nothing. The Nopperabo have claimed you, not dramatically, not obviously, just a small adjustment to your baseline awareness. You're a believer now, not in the literal existence of faceless ghosts, but in the possibility, the maybe, the what if, and that's enough. That's all legends need, just a small opening, a tiny space of uncertainty where impossibility can nestle in and make itself comfortable. You keep walking, the day unfolds, life continues its relentless forward motion. The Nopperabo wait in their dark alleys, patient and blank, and somewhere, someone else is walking alone. Someone else is thinking about faces. Someone else is about to turn a corner and see something that will stay with them forever. The story continues, the legend persists, night after night, century after century, blank faces in the darkness, waiting to be seen, or waiting not to be seen, technically, waiting for the absence to be noticed, waiting to show nothing. In the history of folklore studies, there's a concept called mimetic persistence. It's the idea that certain stories stick around not because they're true, but because they're effective, because they trigger the right responses in human psychology, because they're good at replicating themselves through the medium of human conversation. The Nopperabo are mimetically persistent. They've survived centuries of cultural change, technological advancement, rational enlightenment. They've outlasted countless other legends that seemed equally compelling at the time. Why? Because the fear they represent is hard to rationalize away. You can explain ghost sightings as hallucinations or pareidolia. You can explain monster encounters as misidentified animals. You can explain almost any supernatural phenomenon with enough scientific knowledge and skeptical determination. But the Nopperabo resist explanation. They don't do anything that can be explained away. They just lack. They're an absence, not a presence. And you can't explain an absence. You can only notice it. That makes them particularly effective as legends. They don't give skeptics anything to grab onto. No behavior to analyze, no motivation to question, no internal logic to poke holes in. Just, person has no face. Person should have face. Person doesn't. Error does not compute. And that error, that moment of cognitive dissonance, is exactly what makes them memorable, makes them shareable, makes them persistent. Your brain can't let go of something that doesn't make sense. It keeps worrying at it, like a tongue probing a sawtooth, trying to find an explanation, trying to resolve the contradiction. But the Nopperabo offer no resolution, no closure, no satisfying answer. They're an open loop that never closes, a question without an answer, a story that ends on an ellipsis. And that's infuriating and compelling in equal measure. You walk through the city, and these thoughts drift through your mind like smoke, half-formed, nebulous, not quite conscious reasoning, just noticing, connecting dots, understanding on some level why this particular legend has such staying power. It's not the scariest legend, not the most elaborate, not the most culturally significant, but it's effective, economical, pure, a minimalist masterpiece of folklore, the haiku of horror stories, person, turn, blank. That's it. That's the whole story. Everything else is embellishment, and maybe that's the final lesson of the Nopperabo. That less is more. That suggestion is more powerful than explanation. That what you don't show is more frightening than what you do. The facelessness isn't the horror. The looking is the horror, the moment of recognition. The instant where your brain processes the information and rejects it and accepts it simultaneously. That split second of cognitive dissonance. That's where the real fear lives. The Nopperabo just facilitate it. They're the catalyst, the trigger, the blank canvas onto which your mind projects its worst fears, which will be different for everyone, personal, customized. Some people will see the facelessness and think of death, the ultimate erasure, the final loss of identity. Some will think of anonymity, of being lost in crowds, of not mattering, of being forgettable. Some will think of masks, of fake identities, of never knowing who people really are beneath their social faces. The Noparabo don't choose what you see in their absence. You choose. Your fears choose. They just provide the blank space. Fill in your own horror. It's democratic in a way, egalitarian. Everyone gets their own personalized nightmare. You're approaching your destination now, work, or an appointment, or wherever you decided you needed to be today. The walking meditation ends. The thoughts about faceless ghosts and folklore persistence fade into the background. Time to be productive. Time to engage with the world. Time to wear your face and use it to communicate with other face-wearing humans. Time to be normal. But the Noparabo are still there, in the back of your mind, filed away but not forgotten, ready to emerge again the next time you walk alone at night, the next time you think about legends, the next time someone turns around. They're patient, they can wait, they're good at waiting, it's all they do really. Wait in the darkness, exist in absence, be nothing in particular. And somehow, through the alchemy of folklore, that nothing becomes something, that absence becomes presence, the blank becomes significant, and you carry it with you, whether you want to or not. A small weight, a minor haunting, a whisper of impossibility in the otherwise rational landscape of modern life. The Noparabo don't need to appear to every person, don't need to manifest constantly, don't need to prove themselves. They just need to be possible, need to exist as potential, need to lurk at the edges of awareness. And they do. They are. They lurk. In dark alleys and empty streets, in late-night thoughts and half-remembered stories, in the moment before someone turns around, always waiting, always blank, always ready to show nothing. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything they need to be. You've arrived. Time to stop thinking about ghosts. Time to engage with the present. Time to be here, now, fully. But tonight, when the sun sets and darkness returns, they'll be waiting. The Noparabo, the faceless ones, the blank spaces in human form, waiting for someone to walk alone, waiting for someone to notice, waiting to turn around, waiting to reveal the absence, and the cycle continues. Has continued, will continue, for as long as humans walk at night, for as long as people tell stories, for as long as faces matter and the lack thereof disturbs us. The Noparabo persist, silent, faceless, eternal, showing nothing, meaning everything. Day turns to evening, turns to night. The cycle you've watched countless times before, the cycle that will continue long after you stop watching. The city lights come on, one by one, street by street, pushing back the darkness but never quite eliminating it. There are always shadows, always dark corners, always alleys where light doesn't quite reach. Those are the Noparabo's domain, their natural habitat, the spaces where they thrive. Not because they avoid light, they don't avoid anything. They don't have preferences or fears or desires, they just exist. And they exist most effectively where they're hardest to see clearly, where details blur, where faces become difficult to distinguish. In proper light, facelessness would be obvious immediately, clinical, undeniable. But in shadow, in the space between streetlights, in that twilight zone where your eyes aren't quite sure what they're seeing, that's where ambiguity lives, that's where doubt flourishes, that's where legends thrive. You're home again, evening settling in. The day completed, for better or worse. You make dinner, eat mechanically, barely tasting. Your mind is elsewhere, thinking about walking, about wandering, about whether tonight is a night for late-night exploration. You probably shouldn't. You have work tomorrow. You need sleep. You need to act like a responsible adult who makes sensible choices about bedtime. But there's a pull, a gentle insistence, the night calling to you in its quiet way. Just a short walk, you tell yourself. Just around the block. Just enough to clear your head before sleep. You know it won't be just around the block. It never is. The walk will extend, elongate, stretch itself across hours. You'll find yourself miles from home, following some internal compass that doesn't point north so much as toward interesting, toward possibility, toward the chance of seeing something impossible. You finish eating, clean up, the rituals of domestic life, performed without thought, muscle memory, routine made flesh, and then you're putting on your shoes, finding your keys, making the decision without consciously deciding, going out into the night again, because you have to. because staying inside feels wrong, because the Noprabo are out there, whether real or imagined, and you need to look for them, not to find them. Finding them would almost be disappointing, would resolve the mystery, would answer the question. Just to look, just to walk through darkness with the possibility hanging over you like a comfortable threat, just to be in the space where impossible things might happen. The door closes behind you, locks with a soft click. You're outside, free. Anonymous in the gathering darkness. The city at night is different than the city by day. Same geography, same streets, same buildings. But the atmosphere changes. The quality of attention shifts. During the day, everything is public, exposed, obvious. You're surrounded by witnesses, other people confirming reality through their presence. But at night, witnesses become sparse. Reality becomes more subjective, more personal, more negotiable. If you see something strange, something impossible, there's no crowd to appeal to, no consensus to rely on. Just you and whatever you saw and the question, did that really happen? You start walking. No destination, no plan, just motion. Just the act of moving through space, seeing what you find. The streets are familiar. You've walked them hundreds of times, could probably navigate them blind, just through accumulated spatial memory. But familiarity doesn't breed contempt. It breeds comfort. These are your streets, your alleys, your dark corners. You know them. They know you. And somewhere in them, maybe, the Noprabo wait. Your own personal faceless ghosts, your own private impossibility. You pass a few other people, night workers, late diners, others who've chosen darkness over light, silence over noise. You nod to them, they nod back. The universal acknowledgement of fellow night travellers. We're both here. We both chose this. We understand each other without needing to speak. None of them have no faces, all features intact, all identity present and accounted for. Just normal people, boring people, people who disappoint through their ordinariness, which is harsh. They didn't ask to be your personal faceless ghost. They're just living their lives, just walking their own walks. But still, a small part of you hoped, anticipated, expected, and was let down by reality's insistence on being mundane. You turn down an alley, narrower than most, darker than most. The kind of alley that feels private even though it's technically public space. Your footsteps echo slightly, the sound bouncing off brick walls, coming back to you transformed. Not quite the same as when they left. You're alone here, properly alone. No other people, no sounds of life. Just you and the darkness and the space between walls. This is it, you think. This is where it would happen, if it's going to happen, if the Noprabo exist outside folklore and exist inside this alley. This is the moment. You walk slowly, deliberately, giving the universe time to manifest impossibility. Giving the Noprabo time to appear, but nothing appears, just the alley, just the darkness, just the continued disappointing persistence of normal reality. You reach the end of the alley, emerge onto a better lit street. The moment passes, no ghost, no blank face, no horror or wonder or revelation, just a walk through an alley. Just another night of wandering without finding what you're looking for. Except you are finding what you're looking for. The looking itself is what you're looking for, the possibility, the anticipation, the could be. You don't actually want to see a Noprabo. The reality would be terrifying, psychologically damaging, proof that the world doesn't work the way you thought it did. You want the maybe, the potential, the excitement of wondering. You want Schrödinger's face, both there and not there. Both possible and impossible. As long as you don't see it definitively, it can be both. And both is more interesting than either. You keep walking. The night is still young. Plenty of darkness left. Plenty of alleys unexplored. Plenty of chances for nothing to happen in interesting ways. The Noprabo are out there. Somewhere. Maybe. Probably not. But maybe. And that maybe is enough. That maybe is perfect. It keeps you walking. Keeps you looking. Keeps you engaged with darkness and possibility and the thin line between reality and legend. The Noprabo don't need to be real. They just need to be possible. And as long as you're walking alone at night, as long as there are dark alleys and shadowy figures, they will remain possible. They will remain in that sweet spot between belief and disbelief, between yes and no, between face and facelessness. They will remain blank, undefined, potential, and you will remain their audience, their witness, their believer in non-belief, their skeptic who still looks over their shoulder, their perfect victim, or perfect companion. Hard to say which. Probably both. You walk for hours, time doing that weird elastic thing it does at night, stretching and compressing unpredictably. Sometimes a block takes forever. Sometimes miles pass in what feels like minutes. You're not keeping track, not checking your phone, not worrying about time or distance or the practical concern of eventually needing to get home. Just walking, just existing in motion, just being present in darkness. This is meditation, you realize, not the sitting still, focused breathing kind, the moving, mind-wandering kind. The kind where thoughts flow freely and you're both deeply present and completely absent. You're thinking about everything and nothing, about faces and identity and folklore and fear, about the difference between being alone and being lonely, about why humans tell stories and why some stories persist and others fade, about Naperabo and what they mean and whether meaning matters. Big thoughts, small thoughts, thoughts that dissolve before completing themselves. The walking provides rhythm, the darkness provides privacy, your mind provides content. It's peaceful, really peaceful, despite the subject matter, despite the mild unease that comes with walking alone at night. Or maybe because of those things, maybe peace requires a little edge, a little discomfort. A reminder that you're alive and vulnerable and brave enough to walk through darkness anyway. The Naperabo, real or imagined, provide that edge, that reminder, that small frisson of fear that makes the peaceful parts feel earned. You're grateful for them, in a weird way. Grateful for the legend, grateful for the possibility, grateful for the way they make ordinary walks feel like small adventures. Without them, you'd just be walking, just covering distance pointlessly, just burning time and calories. But with them, with the chance however slim of encountering impossibility, every walk becomes a quest, every alley becomes meaningful, every stranger becomes potentially faceless. The Naperabo give your nighttime wandering purpose, or the illusion of purpose, which is close enough. You're searching for them. You won't find them. You don't want to find them, but the search itself is the point. The search is everything. You pass by a cemetery, small, old, sandwiched between newer buildings like a reminder of less developed times. The gates are locked, closed for the night, protecting the dead from the living, or maybe the other way around. You pause at the fence, look through the bars at the tombstones beyond, dark shapes in darker shadows. Do the Naperabo visit cemeteries? Do they wander among graves, faceless spirits among the remembering stones? Probably not. They seem more interested in the living, in travellers, in people who can be frightened or confused or unsettled. The dead are already faceless in a way, already erased, already reduced to names on stones and memories growing vaguer with each passing year. The Naperabo would be redundant here. Unnecessary. Just another blank face among many. They need the living to give them context, to provide the contrast that makes their facelessness meaningful. Without faces around them, they're just smooth, unremarkable, normal in their abnormality. You move on from the cemetery, back to the streets of the living, where faces matter and presence is presumed. The night is getting deeper now, that witching hour stretch. That time when the boundary between today and tomorrow becomes arbitrary and meaningless. This is when the Naperabo would appear, if they were going to. This is their time, the deepest dark, the loneliest hours. You're ready. You've been ready. You're walking with heightened awareness, noticing everything, prepared for impossibility. But impossibility doesn't arrive. Just more streets, more darkness. More ordinary night continuing its ordinary existence. And that's okay. That's good even. Disappointment isn't the right word. You're not disappointed. You're content, satisfied with the search, happy to have walked and thought and existed in this particular way. The Naperabo don't owe you an appearance, don't owe you validation, don't owe you anything. They exist in folklore, in story, in the collective imagination. That's enough. That's where they belong. In your mind, not in your physical space. In possibility, not in actuality. You can live with that. You do live with that. You will continue living with that. The Naperabo as permanent maybe, as eternal question, as legend that stays legend. Perfect. You're getting tired now, the walking catching up with you, your body reminding you that it needs rest eventually. Time to head home. Time to conclude tonight's wandering. Time to accept that once again, the faceless ghosts stayed wherever faceless ghosts stay, when they're not appearing to travellers. You orient yourself. Figure out where you are relative to where you need to be. Start walking with actual direction instead of random meandering. The way home feels faster, always does. The return trip collapses time in a way the outward journey doesn't. Going is exploration. Coming back is completion. Different mental states, different perception of duration. You pass through familiar streets with less attention now. Your mind is turning towards sleep, toward rest, toward the unconscious facelessness of dreams. You'll see an opera bow in your dreams, maybe. Encounter them in that space where impossible things happen routinely. Where faces melt and shift and disappear without causing alarm. Dream logic accepts facelessness easily. Of course that person has no face. Why would they? This is a dream. Anything goes. It's waking reality that has the problem with it, that rejects it as impossible, that insists on faces staying where they belong. Maybe the Nopperabo are dream creatures that occasionally slip through, break containment, manifest in waking world by accident or intention. Maybe the people who see them are just temporarily dreaming while awake, catching a glimpse of dream logic bleeding through. Maybe the boundary between sleeping and waking isn't as solid as we think. Maybe it's permeable. Maybe things cross over sometimes, maybe. Probably not. But maybe you're home. Finally. After hours of walking, after miles of distance. After countless thoughts about faces and legends and the nature of fear, you unlock your door, step inside, lock it behind you. The familiar ritual of returning. Your apartment is exactly as you left it. No surprises, no disturbances, no faceless ghosts waiting in your living room, just your space, your things, your normal life waiting patiently for you to return to it. You should shower, should eat something, should do all the responsible self-care things, but you're too tired, too done with the day, too ready for unconsciousness. You head to your bedroom, collapse onto the bed, close your eyes. Sleep comes quickly, mercifully, pulling you down into darkness. And in that darkness, in that space where you have no face because you have no awareness, the Nopperabo wait. Not real, not imaginary, something in between. Existing in the stories we tell, in the fears we carry, in the possibilities we can't quite dismiss. Waiting in their blank patience for the next person to walk alone at night, the next traveller to turn down the wrong alley, the next believer or skeptic or curious fool who wants to see something impossible. They have time, they have darkness, they have all the blank patience in the world. They can wait. They're very good at waiting. It's all they've ever done. You wake up slowly, consciousness returning in layers. First just awareness of existence, then awareness of body, then awareness of location and time and the practical concerns of being a person who needs to function in the world. You open your eyes, morning light or afternoon light. Hard to tell. You slept heavily, the kind of sleep that erases time. Your phone tells you it's actually early afternoon. You slept through the morning, through alarms probably, though you don't remember setting any. Through the normal waking hours when productive people do productive things. But you don't feel guilty, just rested. Your body needed the sleep. Your mind needed the break. You gave yourself both. The walking last night feels distant now, like something that happened to someone else, or something you dreamed. The memories are there, but they have that fuzzy quality of recalled dreams rather than recalled reality. Did you really walk for hours? Did you really think about faceless ghosts the entire time? Did you really stand outside a cemetery contemplating folklore? Probably. Yes, you have the tired feet to prove it. But it feels absurd in daylight. The night has a way of making things feel significant that day reveals as silly. Meaningful midnight thoughts become embarrassing afternoon memories. You walked around thinking about legends, about impossible encounters, about faces and the lack thereof. Cool, normal, very rational use of time, except it was meaningful. It was significant. Just not in ways that translate well to daylight and practical consciousness. Night thinking and day thinking are different languages. What makes sense in one doesn't always pass in the other. The Nopperabo make sense at night. They fit into the darkness. They belong in that space of uncertainty and shadow. But right now, with sun streaming through your windows and the sounds of normal life happening outside, they seem ridiculous. Childish. like being afraid of monsters under the bed, which is fine. Which is how it should be. Legends don't need to make sense in daylight. They just need to make sense when it matters, when you're alone, when it's dark, when the rational mind loosens its grip just enough for possibility to creep in. You get up, shower. The water is hot and helps complete the transition from sleep to waking, from night thoughts to day thoughts, from possibility to practicality. You have things to do today. Normal things, adult things, things that don't involve wandering or wondering or looking for faceless ghosts. You make coffee, toast, the breakfast of people who woke up too late for breakfast but refused to skip straight to lunch out of principle. You eat mechanically. Your mind is still catching up to your body, still processing the transition from unconscious to conscious. Still deciding what to think about now that thinking is required. Your phone buzzes, messages, emails, the digital world asserting its claim on your attention. You ignore it for now, let it wait. Give yourself a few more minutes of quiet before engaging with the demands of modern existence. You think about last night again. The walking, the searching, the not finding. It was good. It was exactly what you needed, even though you didn't know you needed it. Time alone, time in motion, time to let your mind wander without direction or purpose. The Nopperabo were just an excuse, a framework, a way to make aimless wandering feel intentional. You weren't really looking for them. You were looking for the feeling of looking, the experience of searching, the sensation of being open to possibility while knowing possibility probably wouldn't arrive. It's a game you play with yourself, a way to make life feel more interesting than it is, more mysterious, more full of potential impossibility. And it works. Last night felt significant, meaningful, like you were part of something larger than yourself, even though you were just walking alone thinking about old stories. The Nopperabo do that, give significance to the insignificant, make ordinary walks feel like quests, turn empty alleys into spaces of potential encounter. They're useful, even if they're not real. Maybe especially because they're not real. Real things have limitations. Real things are bound by physics and probability, and the disappointing insistence of reality to remain mundane. But legends can be anything, can exist anywhere, can mean whatever you need them to mean. The Nopperabo are Schrödinger's ghosts, both real and unreal, both possible and impossible, both present and absent. As long as you never definitively encounter them, they can remain in that perfect state of superposition, both scary and not scary, both meaningful and meaningless. It's only observation that would collapse the waveform, force them into one state or the other, make them either definitely real or definitely imagined. And who wants that? Who wants certainty? Certainty is boring. Certainty is the death of wonder. Better to leave them undefined, unobserved, existing in potential rather than actuality. You finish your coffee, rinse the cup, put it away. The small rituals of domestic maintenance, the things you do to maintain the illusion of being a functional adult. Your phone buzzes again, more insistent this time. The world will not be ignored. The world has needs and expectations and a complete lack of interest in your philosophical musings about legendary faceless ghosts. You pick up the phone, messages from friends, work stuff, the usual demands on your attention and time and energy. You respond to a few, ignore others, make a mental note to deal with the rest later. Later is a wonderful concept, a magical time when everything will somehow be easier or less annoying or more manageable. Later never actually arrives, but it's comforting to believe in. You should probably go outside, do something productive, engage with the world, be a person who exists during daylight hours, but the idea feels exhausting. The night took something out of you, not in a bad way, just in a way that makes daylight engagement feel like too much effort. You decide to stay in. Give yourself permission to be unproductive, to exist without purpose, to waste the day in whatever way feels right. You put on music, something instrumental, something that fills the space without demanding attention. You sit on your couch, not doing anything, just existing, just being present in your own space without agenda or goal. It's meditative in its own way, different from the walking meditation of last night, but equally valid. Stillness has its own kind of peace. Your mind wanders, not in any particular direction, just drifting, touching on thoughts lightly, not holding on to anything. You think about faces again, Can't help it. The subject has lodged itself in your consciousness, claimed space in your mental landscape. You think about how strange it is that we identify people primarily by their faces. That we've evolved this incredibly sophisticated face recognition ability, that we can distinguish thousands of different faces, remember them, attach them to identities and personalities and relationships, but we can't see our own faces, not directly, only through reflection or photography, only through the mediation of mirrors and cameras and other people's descriptions. We're faceless to ourselves. We exist from the inside out. We see the world, but we don't see the thing the world uses to identify us. It's a strange asymmetry. You spend your entire life being recognized by something you can't directly perceive. Is that what the Noperabo represent? The strangeness of faces? The weird fact of their necessity and their simultaneous inaccessibility? Maybe. Or maybe they just represent fear of the unknown, or fear of erasure, or fear of anonymity, or maybe they don't represent anything. Maybe they're just a cool, scary image that got turned into folklore because humans love being scared in safe ways. Not everything needs deep meaning. Sometimes a faceless ghost is just a faceless ghost. Though that's less interesting, less satisfying. The human brain craves meaning, craves connection, craves the sense that things mean something beyond their surface appearance. So you project meaning onto blank faces, literally and metaphorically. You take the absence and fill it with significance. The Noperabo would probably find this amusing if they had the capacity for amusement, which they don't, because no face means no expressions, means no way to convey or feel emotion, unless they feel emotion internally without expressing it. Unless they're full of thoughts and feelings and opinions that just have no outlet. That would be worse, actually. Worse than being blank all the way through. To feel, but not express. To have an inner life trapped behind smooth, featureless flesh. To be screaming internally with no mouth to scream through. That's horror of a different kind. Not the horror of encountering the faceless, but the horror of being faceless. Being trapped in inexpression. Being unable to communicate or connect or make yourself understood. Maybe that's the real fear. Not that we'll encounter a Noperabo, but that we'll become one. That we'll lose our ability to be seen, to be recognized, to be known. That we'll be smoothed away, erased, reduced to blank nothing. Everyone feels that way sometimes. Invisible, unnoticed. Functionally faceless even while technically having a face. Moving through the world without making an impression, without being memorable, without mattering enough for anyone to bother really seeing you. The Noperabo just literalize it, make the metaphorical actual, turn the feeling into flesh, or lack of flesh, or however their blank non-faces work. You're spiraling, getting too deep into analysis, extracting meaning that might not exist, projecting psychology onto folklore that's probably just meant to be spooky. Sometimes a scary story is just a scary story. Not everything is a metaphor, not everything has layers, though layers are more fun, more interesting, more worthy of hours of thought and late-night walking and daytime brooding. You get up, move to the window, look outside at the normal world doing its normal thing. People walking, cars driving, life happening in all its mundane glory. Everyone out there has a face. Everyone out there is identifiable, expressible, recognizable as human. No blank spaces, no smooth voids, no Noperabo wandering among the crowd. Just people, regular boring people, going about their regular boring days. And that's good. That's how it should be. Reality should be boring. Safety requires boredom. The alternative is chaos. But a small part of you wishes it weren't. Wishes that just once you could look out your window and see something impossible, something that doesn't fit, something that proves the world is stranger than it seems. Just once. Just for a moment. Just to know. But nothing appears. Nothing changes. The world remains stubbornly mundane. The Noperabo stay in their proper place, in stories, in imagination. In the darkness of night where they belong, and you stay in your proper place, in your apartment, in daylight, in the safety of rational reality. Everyone where they're supposed to be, everything as it should be, boring, safe, disappointing, perfect. You step back from the window, return to the couch, pick up a book, might as well do something with the afternoon, might as well engage your brain in a directed way rather than letting it spiral endlessly around the same subjects. The book is fiction, something light, something that doesn't require deep thought or emotional investment. Just a story, just entertainment, just a way to pass time. You read a few pages, the words flow past, you're absorbing them but not really engaging. Your mind is elsewhere, still thinking about faces, still thinking about legends, still thinking about last night's walking. You put the book down, can't focus. Your brain isn't in reading mode, it's in wandering mode, processing mode, integration mode. Last night gave you a lot to think about, and thinking takes time, takes space, takes the freedom to drift without direction. So you give yourself that. Let your mind do what it needs to do. Stop trying to force focus or productivity or conventional afternoon activities. Just exist. Just be. Just let thoughts flow through without trying to direct or control them. The Nopperabo drift through your thoughts, periodically, not dominating, just present, just part of the general mental landscape now. You've adopted them, made them yours, added them to your personal collection of interesting ideas and useful frameworks, and things to think about when thinking is required. They'll stay with you now, probably forever, or at least until something more interesting comes along to replace them, which is fine, which is good, which is exactly what legends are supposed to do: implant themselves, persist, become part of the mental furniture. You're a carrier now, a host, a vector for the Nopperabo meme. You'll probably tell someone about them eventually, share the story, pass it along, and they'll think about faceless ghosts, and maybe they'll go walking at night, and maybe they'll look over their shoulder when footsteps approach in darkness, and the legend will persist, will spread, will continue its centuries-long journey through human consciousness. You're part of that now, part of the chain, part of the story telling itself. It's a small immortality, not personal, not your own. But you're participating in something that will outlast you, contributing to something larger than yourself. The Nopperabo will still be told when you're gone, will still be feared and imagined and searched for by future people walking future streets. You're just a brief moment in their long history, a temporary host, a single link in an endless chain. But that's okay, that's enough, to be part of something that persists, to contribute to the continuation of something old and strange and persistently frightening, to keep the story alive, to pass it forward, to ensure that future travellers will also wonder if the person approaching in the dark has a face. That's legacy of a kind. Small, odd, but real. You smile slightly, pleased with the thought, pleased with your role as keeper and carrier of faceless ghost stories. It's a weird thing to take pride in, but you're a weird person, so it fits. The afternoon passes, time doing its thing, moving forward relentlessly whether you're paying attention or not. Eventually you get hungry, make food, eat without tasting. Your body needs fuel, you provide it. The transaction is mechanical, you clean up, tidy your space slightly, small acts of maintenance, small ways of pushing back against entropy. The sun is getting lower. Evening approaching, the day cycle continuing its eternal pattern. Soon it will be night again. Soon darkness will return. Soon you'll have to decide whether you're going out or staying in, whether you're seeking or resting, whether you're walking or sleeping. You're not sure yet, don't need to be. The night is still hours away, decisions can wait. For now, you just exist in the transition. In the space between day and night, in the liminal time when anything is possible but nothing is required. You think about the Nopperabo again. Can't help it. They're on your mind. They've claimed space there. They're not leaving. You wonder if they experience time the way you do, if they're aware of day and night, if they care about cycles and patterns and the regular progression of hours. Probably not. They're not human, don't have human concerns, don't experience reality through human frameworks. They probably just exist, timelessly, perpetually, always present even when not visible, or they don't exist at all. Just stories, just ideas, just concepts that have no reality outside human imagination. Both options are equally possible, equally unprovable, equally satisfying in different ways. You could believe either. Could choose reality or fantasy. Could come down on the side of skepticism or faith. But you choose neither. Choose both. Choose the uncertainty. Choose to live in the space where Nopperabo might be real and might not be, where the question remains open, where possibility persists. It's more comfortable there, more interesting, more aligned with how you actually experience the world. Certainty is overrated, doubt is underappreciated. The space between knowing and not knowing is where the good stuff happens. The sun sets. Slowly. The way it always does. No drama, no fanfare. Just the patient turning of the earth. The predictable progression of light to dark. You watch it from your window. The colours changing, the shadows lengthening, the day releasing its hold. Night approaches, your time, your element. The hours when you feel most yourself. You start preparing. Not consciously. Just gravitating toward shoes, toward keys, toward the door. Your body knows before your mind decides. Knows that you're going out. That you're walking. That you're seeking again. Same as last night. Same as many nights. The pattern repeating, the ritual continuing. You're going to walk. Going to wander. Going to look for something you won't find. And it will be good. Will be exactly what you need. Will be the way you make sense of existence. The Noparabo will wait in their darkness. Present or absent. Real or imagined. Both or neither. And you'll walk toward them. Knowing you won't reach them. Knowing that's not the point. The walking is the point. The searching. The openness to possibility. The willingness to exist in uncertainty. To embrace the maybe. To live in the question. That's what the Noparabo teach. Not fear. Not horror. Not the terror of the faceless. But comfort with ambiguity. Peace with the unknown. Acceptance that some questions don't have answers. And that's okay. That's beautiful. That's exactly how it should be. You open the door, step out into the gathering darkness, begin the walk. The Noparabo are out there. Or they're not. Or there's something in between. Doesn't matter. You're walking anyway. Walking toward possibility, walking into night, walking home. The streets feel different tonight. Not bad different, just different. Like the city reshuffled itself slightly while you slept. Same components. New arrangement. Or maybe you're different. Maybe the walking yesterday changed something, shifted your perception, altered how you see familiar spaces. Hard to tell. Internal changes and external changes feel the same from the inside. Both result in the world looking different. Both create the sensation of newness. You walk without plan, without destination, just following instinct, following interest, following the path that feels right in the moment. Left here, right there. Straight ahead for a while. The choices are arbitrary, but they feel significant, feel like they mean something even though they probably don't. That's the magic of walking. It makes randomness feel intentional, makes aimlessness feel purposeful, makes wandering feel like seeking. You pass a group of teenagers hanging out on a corner. They're loud, laughing, engaged in some private joke that's hilarious to them and incomprehensible to everyone else. They glance at you. You glance at them. The mutual acknowledgement of stranger seeing stranger. All faces present and accounted for, all perfectly normal, all disappointingly human. You move on. They return to their joke. Ships passing. Lives intersecting briefly, then diverging. You wonder what they'd think if they knew you were out here looking for faceless ghosts. Would they laugh? Would they think you're weird? Would they secretly wish they were doing the same thing? Probably laugh. Teenagers are savage. They'd mock you for believing in legends, for taking folklore seriously, for being an adult who still thinks about monsters. But maybe some of them would get it, would understand the appeal, would recognize the value of walking at night with impossible goals. Maybe one of them will remember this moment years from now. Remember seeing a lone figure walking purposefully through the night and wonder what you were seeking, what you were running from, what story you were living, and maybe they'll start their own nighttime walking practice, their own searching for the unsearchable, their own relationship with darkness and possibility. That's how these things spread, not through direct teaching, through observation, through example, through seeing someone else do something and thinking, I could do that too. The Noparabo spread the same way. Someone tells someone who tells someone. The story propagates. The legend grows. Each telling slightly different but the core remaining constant. Person, turn, blank. The details vary but the essence persists. And that's what matters. The transmissible kernel. The part that sticks. The part that reproduces itself in new minds. You're a vector. The teenagers were potential hosts. The infection might or might not have taken. Won't know until years later when one of them is walking alone at night and thinking about faces. That's the beauty of memes, of ideas that propagate. You don't need to convince anyone, don't need to argue or persuade, just expose them, plant the seed, let it grow or not grow on its own. The Noperabo are good at this. They've been spreading for centuries, adapting, evolving, finding new hosts in new cultures, remaining relevant across massive changes in technology and society. They're successful memes, fit, optimized for transmission, resilient against cultural selection pressures. They'll probably outlast most other legends, probably still be told when current fears become outdated. When modern anxieties seem quaint and historical, because the fear they tap is too fundamental, too hardwired, too connected to basic human psychology to ever become fully obsolete. As long as humans have faces and care about faces and use faces to navigate social reality, the Noperabo will remain frightening. Their evergreen horror, timeless fear, permanent uncertainty. You turn down another street. This one is residential, quiet. Lights on in windows, families inside living their evening lives. You glimpse interiors as you pass, living rooms, kitchens, the small domestic theatres where normal life plays out. Everyone inside has faces. Everyone inside is known to the people around them. Everyone inside exists in the warm certainty of recognition and relationship. You're outside, alone, anonymous. Functionally faceless to anyone who might glance out and see you passing. Just another walker, another night wanderer, another stranger moving through darkness. You like it. The anonymity, the freedom, the lack of recognition or expectation or social obligation. Out here you can be anyone. Be no one. Be the protagonist of your own strange quest that makes sense to you and no one else. Out here you're writing your own story, living your own legend, creating your own meaning in the meaningless act of walking. The Noperabo understand this. They're anonymous by nature, unknown by definition, free from the burden of identity and recognition. Maybe they're not cursed at all. Maybe they're liberated, free from the constant social performance that comes with having a face. No need to smile when you don't feel like smiling. No need to hide emotions or manage expressions or worry about what your face is telling people. Just smooth blankness, complete neutrality, perfect freedom from the tyranny of facial communication. When you think about it that way, the Noperabo start to seem almost enviable, almost aspirational. To exist without being constantly read, without being constantly judged based on the arrangement of features you didn't choose, without carrying your emotional state on your face for everyone to see. That would be peaceful, actually, restful, a relief from the exhausting performance of being a person with a face. Of course, it would also be isolating, disconnecting, lonely in ways that having a face prevents. So maybe the Noperabo aren't lucky, aren't free, aren't living some enviable existence. Maybe they're trapped, cursed, suffering in ways we can't understand because we've never lost our faces, or maybe they don't care, don't experience it as good or bad, just exist in their facelessness the way you exist in your faceness, just different states of being, neither better nor worse, just different. You're overthinking again, projecting complexity onto something that's probably simple. The Noperabo are scary, that's it, that's the whole thing. Stop trying to make them complicated, but your brain won't stop. Can't stop. This is what it does. Takes simple things and complicates them. Finds layers and implications and meanings that might not be intended. It's annoying sometimes. Makes it hard to just enjoy things at face value. Makes everything an opportunity for analysis. But it's also how you make sense of the world. How you find interest in the ordinary. How you turn a simple walk into a philosophical exploration. The Noperabo are just the catalyst, the lens, the framework you're using tonight to think about faces and identity and recognition, and all the other big concepts that occupy your mental space. Tomorrow it might be something else, different legend, different framework, different lens, but tonight it's faceless ghosts, and that's fine. That's good. That's giving you plenty to think about as you walk. You emerge onto a main street, brighter here, more people, more activity. The city at night in its more social mode, restaurants and bars, people eating and drinking and laughing, living their Friday night or Saturday night or whatever night it is. You've lost track of days. They blur together when you don't follow conventional schedules. You move through the crowd. Part of it but not part of it. Present but not participating. Observing without engaging. The faces here are animated, expressive, full of life and emotion and social energy. People are performing for each other, making impressions, building connections through the universal language of facial expression. No Noperabo here. Wouldn't fit. Would stand out immediately. Would disrupt the social flow. The Faceless need darkness, need isolation, need context where their blankness can be ambiguous rather than obvious. In bright light surrounded by animated faces, there's no ambiguity. The absence would be glaring, impossible to miss or misinterpret. So you won't find them here. Won't encounter impossibility in this well-lit social space. You need to go back to the darkness, back to the empty streets, back to the places where you're alone and uncertain and open to seeing things that don't fit. You turn down a side street, away from the lights and noise, back into shadow, back into solitude. Better. This feels right. This is where you belong. This is where the search can continue. The contrast is stark. One moment surrounded by people and light and sound. The next moment alone in relative darkness and silence. The city contains multitudes, social spaces and solitary spaces, bright zones and dark zones, places for every mood and need. You're in the solitary dark now, where you prefer to be, where you function best, where your mind can wander without external stimulation demanding attention. The street is narrow, old. The buildings on either side are mismatched, different eras, different styles. All pressed together in the organic chaos of unplanned urban growth. You walk slowly, deliberately, giving yourself time to notice details, to see the textures and shadows and small variations that make each moment unique. A cat crosses your path, pauses, looks at you with that inscrutable cat expression, then continues on its way. Cat business, cat secrets, cat knowledge you'll never access. You wonder if cats see Noperabo, if their different sensory apparatus picks up things humans miss, if they encounter the impossible routinely and just accept it as part of the world's natural strangeness. Probably not. Cats don't care about faces. They navigate by smell and sound and movement. A faceless human would just be another human. Slightly off, slightly wrong, but not fundamentally different. Though cats are supposed to sense supernatural things, according to folklore, supposed to see spirits and demons and otherworldly entities, so maybe they do see the Noperabo, see them constantly, and just accept them, file them under one more weird thing in a world full of weird things. Cats are good at acceptance, at living with mystery, at existing in a reality they don't fully understand without needing to understand it. Humans could learn from that, could benefit from more acceptance, more mystery, more comfort with not knowing. But humans need understanding, need explanations, need to categorize and label and make sense of everything. It's a blessing and a curse. The need to understand drives progress, drives discovery, drives the development of knowledge and science and all the tools we use to shape reality. But it also makes mystery uncomfortable, makes the unknown threatening, makes encounters with the inexplicable distressing rather than fascinating. The Noperabo thrive in that discomfort, feed on it, use it to perpetuate themselves. They're optimized for humans specifically, for creatures who need faces to make sense, who rely on facial recognition, who experience facelessness as fundamentally wrong. To a cat, they'd be nothing special. To a human, they're nightmare fuel. That's elegant design, in a weird way. Perfect targeting. Though again, you're probably giving them too much credit. Assigning intention where there's probably just accident. Evolution selects for what works. The Noperabo work because they scare humans. Simple as that. No intelligence behind it. No design. Just the blind process of mimetic selection favouring concepts that reproduce effectively. The scary stories get told more than the boring ones. The memorable images persist longer than the forgettable ones. The legends that tap primal fears outlast the ones that don't. The Noperabo tick all the boxes. Scary, memorable, primal, perfect mimetic fitness. They'll probably outlast you, outlast your culture, outlast your language, keep propagating long after everything you know has transformed into something unrecognisable. That's comforting in a strange way. Nice to know something will persist. Nice to think about future humans walking future streets and thinking about faceless ghosts. Same fear, same story, same basic human reaction to the impossible. Some things don't change. Some fears are too fundamental. Some legends are too well designed to ever become obsolete. The Noperabo are one of those things, permanent fixtures in human consciousness, As long as there are humans, there will be Noprabo. You've walked far from the social district now, deep into residential areas. The streets here are very quiet, most people inside for the night, the world asleep or at least pretending to be. Your footsteps echo. The sound bounces off buildings, returns to you changed. You're having a conversation with architecture, speaking and being answered in reflections and echoes. It's soothing. The rhythm, the repetition, the confirmation that you exist, that your movement creates sound, that the world responds to your presence. Even when no one else is around, the physical environment acknowledges you, reflects you, confirms your reality. Unless you're a ghost. Ghosts allegedly don't create sounds, don't leave footprints, don't interact with physical reality in ways that leave evidence. But you're not a ghost. You're solid, physical, real. Your footsteps prove it. The Noprabo presumably leave footprints. They're physical enough to be seen, to turn around, to exist in space. Unless they're not physical, unless they're hallucinations or visions or manifestations that don't actually exist in the material world. The stories don't clarify, don't explain the mechanics, don't distinguish between physical entity and psychological phenomenon. Maybe that's intentional. Maybe ambiguity is part of the design. Keep the explanation vague. Let people fill in details based on their own understanding and fears. It's a good strategy. Specificity invites skepticism. Vagueness invites imagination. Better to let people scare themselves than to spell everything out. The best horror is always implied, suggested, hinted at but never fully shown. The imagination creates worse things than any description could. The Noprabo understand this, or the storytellers who created them understood this. Same result either way. Show just enough, the blank face, the moment of recognition, the impossibility, then stop. Let the witness's imagination do the rest. Let them fill in the implications. Let them create their own personal version of the horror. Everyone will see something slightly different. Project their own fears. Add their own details. Make it personal and therefore more frightening. That's genius, really. Crowdsourced horror. Customized fear. Each person creating exactly the version that will scare them most. The Noprabo are blank in every sense. Blank faces, blank motivations, blank explanations, blank spaces for projection. They're mirrors, not physically, but functionally. Reflecting back whatever the viewer brings to the encounter. You're reflecting a lot tonight. Projecting meaning and analysis and philosophical complexity onto something that's probably just meant to be a simple scare. But that's fine. That's what blanks are for. That's what empty spaces invite. Filling, completion, the addition of meaning where none exists. The Noprabo might as well be useful, might as well serve as frameworks for thinking, might as well be more than just scary. They can be scary and meaningful, frightening and thought-provoking, simple and complex simultaneously. That's the beauty of good legends. They work on multiple levels, surface level scary, deeper level meaningful, deepest level reflecting something about human nature or consciousness or existence. The Noprabo work on all three. They're scary if you just want a ghost story. They're meaningful if you want to think about identity and recognition. They're profound if you want to contemplate existence and consciousness and the nature of self. Everyone gets what they need from them. Everyone encounters them differently. Everyone walks away with their own relationship to the blank face, and that relationship persists, changes you, becomes part of how you see the world, which is what you're experiencing right now. The Noprabo have changed your walking, your thinking, your relationship with darkness and strangers and possibility. You're not the same person you were before you started thinking about faceless ghosts. You're slightly different, slightly altered, slightly infected by the meme, and you'll carry that alteration forward, probably forever, probably until your own face is gone and your identity has dissolved into whatever comes after life. The Noprabo will outlast your face, will persist after you're faceless yourself, will continue appearing to other people on other nights. They're more permanent than you, more durable, more likely to exist in some form centuries from now. That's humbling. Being less durable than a legend, being more temporary than a story. But it's also freeing. Takes pressure off. You don't need to be permanent, don't need to last forever, don't need to make an indelible mark on reality. You just need to exist for your little span. Do your walking, think your thoughts, carry the legends that interest you.